Welcome, Drink with James, episode 133. I just listened last week or this week rather, to This American Life's 666th episode, which was all about Satan, and I am incredibly jealous and cannot wait to get to 666 and have like a demonic themed, like death metal drink with James. We're gonna drink like Jägermeister and lamb's blood or something, and it's gonna be great. But we've got quite a few to go till we get to 666. I will probably be like in a walker sipping like, Pedialyte and like prune juice or something, talking about my, digestive system. But in the meantime, we're here. This is one of two episodes we're filming this week. Tim doesn't generally like to do that because I am, like all talent, I can be fussy at times, and if I have to film two in 1 week, sometimes the second one falls flat. But we're gonna do our best to bring the fire both times for you. I'm going on my family's kind of annual ski trip up to Lake Placid, which is the coldest place on the face of God's green earth. It was a terribly cold weekend in New York this weekend. I think it was like it was like 4 degrees here in the city, right? Is that the lowest it got?
I think it was 4, yeah.
4. The high in Lake Placid was -11 that day. I think the low was -28 with like a -52 degree wind chill. It is a miserable and beautiful place. We, as a family, are not ones known to go someplace that's like comfortable or anything. So this is as cold and shitty as it can be, but it's so beautiful. If you haven't been to the Adirondacks, you should go. The mountain there is lovingly called Ice Face because it is essentially like ice skating down a mountain. It should be great. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll see all about it. So, if you haven't listened to the new podcast, you should. By the time this is out, we will have our second episode out with Danielle Bernstein, who obviously all of you know. It is a great episode, super interesting. So one of our employees here, Steph, if you've ever interacted with her, she's known Danielle since she was 9. She co-hosted the podcast with Tim. Really funny, really interesting. So listen to that, and obviously the first episode was moi, yours truly. So if you haven't downloaded it, you can. We also have split the podcast, so now Forecast doesn't exist anymore as a concept or a thing. Just forget it ever existed. We've got the Drink with James podcast, and then we have Foreground, which is our new podcast. So Tim's been filming these things like crazy. Tim's been recording these things like crazy. Some really exciting guests coming out. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. Let's just vibe into some questions right away. Let's move on. Question number 1 is, what do I think the implications of, how should I phrase this? What do I think of the Fyre Festival documentaries, and do I think there's any implications for influencers? Now, I have not watched both. I have a little bone to pick. This is annoying. The internet can be annoying sometimes. I was on my trainer, I ride the bike inside in the winter, and I was going to watch one while I was on the bike. I didn't want to watch both because I have a fucking life. I'm not watching 2 documentaries on the same thing. So I typed in, which one is better? Should I watch the Netflix or the Hulu one? And there's 10 articles from BuzzFeed and Vox and all these places. Nobody answers the fucking question. They all say how they're different, the benefits of this one versus this one. No one just says, watch this one, not the other one. Since I watched the Netflix one, I've heard that one is better. But maybe I'm also biased. Maybe I'm just blocking out everyone who says the Hulu one is great because I can't dedicate 2 more hours of my life to watching a sociopathic rich kid steal a bunch of people's money. That is only something I can dedicate an hour and a half of my life to. So, what do I think of it? 1, listen. I generally, listen, I don't know anything about this Billy guy. I assume he comes from like a rich family. Do you know anything about him?
No, but he has to.
He has to. That kid fucking reeks of generational wealth more than anyone I've ever seen in my life. He is the most entitled, smug guy. He is just, I have met that guy like him. Not him, I've not met him, but I feel like I've met that guy like 20 times in New York. And everyone being like, oh my gosh, he's the most amazing entrepreneur. He's so incredible. And like the second he opened his mouth, I would be like, you're a fucking bullshitter. And I am steering clear as far as is humanly possible. I have tried to put a birthday party on in the time that they tried to put a festival on. It had to have been fairly clear to everyone that this was absolutely never going to work. Now, I digress. It is a good piece of disaster porn. Like, it is just like so satisfying to watch, you know, these guys fall apart because they're such hateful characters. There's like nobody likable in the entire documentary essentially, except the older guy who's like does the, you know, is essentially trying to make it all work. He is super likable.
And the woman that works at the restaurant.
And the woman who works at the restaurant who got her money back, which is great. She is very likable. All the Bahamians?
I have no idea.
All the people that are from the Bahamas were all incredibly likable and super chill about getting stiffed with all their money. So I'm glad they're getting their money back. I'm glad she's getting her money back. Anyway, you should definitely see it. But what are the implications for the influencer space? One, I think it's a pretty clear example that like this shit works. Okay, like their marketing was solely influencers and they sold out a very expensive music festival in like a day. So like, okay, one, obviously this shit works, right? Like influencers, all that, this works. Like we meaning influencers, did what they were supposed to do. They sold the tickets, awesome. I do think it brings up a bigger point that, you know, the brands that you work with and the things that you promote, these things do have consequences. And I think that most influencers I have met are conscientious, thoughtful, caring. They really care about the brands that they talk about. But I think it is a very clear example that like there are consequences to the things that you do. And in this case, like, you know, promoting a brand that might be defrauding people, that might not be able to live up to the expectations has consequences, you know? And while that is way on the scale of fucking crazy, way all the way over here, you know, it's not too dissimilar than, you know, promoting a skincare brand that has all these claims that they do all this amazing stuff when it actually doesn't. You know, I encourage all of you to do your research on your brand clients, especially if it's a brand you haven't heard of. Do your research, you know. It only takes a quick Google search of the name. Like Billy's businesses, like he left a stream of fraud and like bankruptcy and shit behind him. Like it wouldn't have been too hard to like do a little research and see that like everyone from his like credit card company was like suing him and complaining, and that like he had built a business on, you know, these lies and these things that he couldn't actually deliver on. He was selling floor seats to Beyonce for $100 when they were going for $1,000, and then all of a sudden the tickets disappeared an hour before the event. Like, do your research, especially if it's a newer brand. Understand that like if you know, I think that like in general, influencers didn't get pegged for this thing, but like if you are involved in false advertising, like, and you put a message out there that is not true, the FTC can come after you. They can bar you from doing any advertising for years, and they can ruin your livelihood. And you know, the defense that like I didn't know doesn't work. It's like if you break the law and you say, well, I didn't know that was a law. Well, it doesn't preclude you from having to adhere to the law. It is your job to know what is legal and what is illegal. So like that is not a defense. You can't be like, sorry, I was blackout drunk, officer, while driving. I had no idea that that wasn't allowed. Like, you can't do that. In the same way, if you are promoting a brand that is fraudulent, it might come back on you, and you might get hit with a lawsuit and what's the word I'm looking for? And a judgment from the FTC that could completely ruin your ability to continue to do the things that you do to support yourself and your family. So be careful, be especially wary of new brands that are promising a lot of things, and be wary of the scams out there. There's that big article going around about the woman who is scamming influencers and promising these big contracts and deals and getting them to like send her money. I think Olivia Lopez just posted she got targeted by this person. They were telling her that she was going to shoot the Winter Olympics or the Summer Olympics in Japan, but they needed her to send money so they could get this thing and they would pay her back. This is a fairly large scam that's been going on for a while, but seems super legit. This woman is using a legitimate name from a legitimate person in New York City. She is great with impersonations and voices, and she has matched the voice exactly to the people she's impersonating. Just be careful. The world is full of scammers. Do your research. You don't want to be responsible for getting your followers to spend their hard-earned money on a product that cannot deliver what it says it can. It is so detrimental to your overall brand equity that it can't be worth whatever money they're paying you in the short term. So that, I think, is the big lesson from this festival, is to know your partners more and follow your gut and really only work with people that you trust, who you feel like have integrity and can actually do the things that they say they're going to do. Also, generally, steer clear of con men and women. So, okay. Question number 2. Do you feel like it's possible to be successful and maintain your privacy, or as the Brits would say, privacy? Do I think it is possible? Yes. I think, it is possible to be successful and maintain your privacy, absolutely. It is probably harder to be successful and maintain your privacy on Instagram. Be successful on Instagram and maintain your privacy. I think you have to be careful with how much you put out there about your personal life on the internet. I've heard many stories of people who, celebrities who have been plagued with stalkers, and this goes on for years and years. It is difficult to prosecute somebody for following or stalking someone. Unfortunately, the laws are kind of tricky around it. Obviously looking at what happened to Kim Kardashian is again, way over on the scale of crazy stuff that could happen. You do see a general trend of, as people become more successful, they share less and less and less about their lives because they don't want people to know where they are. They don't want people to know where they live. If you, let's say you post out of your apartment a photo of your view in New York City, pretty easy to look at that view and place where you live, and then your super fans would be sitting on the street every time you leave your apartment. That is just not something that you want. And so I think that you should be pretty selective in what you share from your personal life, especially as it relates to where you live. You do not want people knowing where you live. I think I've seen a lot of influencers, as they become more successful, get P.O. boxes. I think that can be smart. Making sure your packages and things don't come to your home. A lot of y'all work from home. That means that your public address that's with public agencies is your home address. That's information that you may not want out in the world. If you live in New York City, there's things like City Copilot, where you can sign up and have packages sent there. You can get a WeWork office for $300-400 a month and get your packages there and have a place where you can go and work. there's options, but again, I would be very careful about what you share. But there are a lot of successful people on the internet that don't share a lot or anything about their private lives. And I think that that's totally okay. You can also stagger your posting, post your stories days after they actually happen so that people can't follow you. The other thing is some people don't really care about privacy. They're happy to share everything in their life and they want everyone to know everything about them, and that is fine. I think that the more you do that, you do open yourself up to a hard reality check and something potentially scary and dangerous happening. And once you put it onto the internet, you can't really take it back. So I would definitely think about, what you're putting out into the world, and if, what you want is to be massively successful and famous influencer, that you can't get rid of that stuff. So it's important to think about, even as you're growing, what you're sharing and how much you're willing to kind of open up and talk about yourself. Because the world is full of fucking weirdos and creeps and psychopaths, and you cannot be too careful, especially when concerned with your privacy. I mean, I see a lot of smaller influencers sharing a lot about like their homes. And again, especially in New York City, I think it's like, when you see a view, it's pretty easy to like start to figure out where a person lives. Especially if it's in a newer building and you can like look at the kitchen and be like, oh, I've seen that, it's the same kitchen over and over. So if you've seen one apartment, you can kind of say, oh, I know where you live. Again, I think a lot of the larger influencers do a pretty good job. Like I think about like Mariana Hewitt. I don't think I've ever seen her talk much about her house or like show it, So like it's a lot of speaking to camera and things like that, but like not in their home. So yeah, I think most bigger influencers tend to share less and less about that because they just want to try and keep that part of their lives separate. Something that someone who spoke at one of our conferences talked about, that some of the schools in New York City are dealing with this. Like, do they want, Instagram celebrities or influencers sending their kids to their kids' private school? Because are they going to be sharing that? Are they going to be sharing photos of that? Like, your privacy extends beyond just yourself as well, especially as you get a family. But it's definitely something to consider. I mean, I think the ideal situation is to be rich and anonymous. For most people, that's probably what they want, to just have a bunch of money but have nobody know who the hell you are. Personally, not me. As I've spoken about before, I'd like to be, famous enough to be recognized, but not so much that like it becomes a pain in my ass and like I can't go to a restaurant. I don't think that's going to happen. But you think about the life you want and share accordingly. Question number 3. I'm going to summarize because it was fairly long. Question number 3 is essentially an influencer who's getting great reach, 70% reach, which is fantastic. Sometimes getting over 100% reach using hashtags and things like that, but not gaining followers. So, getting likes and getting reach, but people aren't coming to the profile off of the hashtags. What can be done about that? And do brands care about where your reach comes from? Interesting question. I'll answer the second part of it first. I don't think currently brands are looking at where the reach comes from. They just want to make sure the eyeballs are on the post. So if 30% of your reach comes from Explore or 50% comes from Explore, don't think that really matters. I think what they just want to see is that you have good reach. Now, eventually I could see that mattering because you could make an argument that if it came from Explore, those people don't know you, and so inherently they don't trust you as much, and so the value of that view is maybe less than a follower who's followed you for years, but we're probably at least a year away from people caring that much about that. We're just still working on getting people to care about looking at reach instead of follower counts. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. Now let's think about what is happening when you're getting good reach from hashtags and from Explore, but you're not getting profile views or follows. I think potentially, and I can't speak to the person who asked the question's actual account, but if I was going to guess, I would say that you're using hashtags that are used very broadly, like OOTD or fashion, and people are going through those hashtags, liking photos to try and drive people back to their profiles. So I would guess that some of those views and likes and engagement are coming from people who are trying to game the system themselves. So there's this echo chamber of everyone trying to get something from someone else and not actually caring. So, this was a point when we visited Facebook, Instagram offices in New York City with the freshman class. They said that, when using hashtags, you should avoid those big ones like OOTD or fashion or, I don't know, whatever the big kind of normal hashtags are, and try and focus more on niche hashtags that are directly related to the exact type of content that you are publishing on that day. I think that if you can do that, you probably have a better chance of converting the view to a profile view and the profile view to a follow. But if you're seeing a lot of reach, but not a lot of conversion or profile views, I would think you're on the wrong hashtags. And I would potentially say that is not super helpful for you in the long term. So look to the niche hashtags, look to something that can be, that does convert to you or for you. Yeah. Anything else? I think that's it for that. How are we doing on time?
Good.
Good? Okay, look, we got to do 2 of these this week, so I'm going to leave it there. If you haven't listened to the new podcast, please do. And as always, we need questions. I know that you grew up in a world where people told you there are no stupid questions. There absolutely are stupid questions. So please think it through before sending your question and send me something good. Thank you. Goodbye.